Welcome to Annie Stories. In this video, I'll be reading a tale called Beauty and the Beast by Henry Ultimus. Have a listen with me to see why the beautiful maiden had to go live in a monster's home. So without further ado, let us begin. Beauty and the Beast. Once upon a time, there was a very rich merchant who had 6 children, 3 boys and 3 girls. As he was a kind father, he spared no pains in bringing them up and had them taught everything that was good. His daughters were very pretty, but the youngest was prettiest of all. While she was little, she was always called Beauty, and when she grew up, she still kept the name, so that her sisters were full of jealousy. But Beauty was not only lovelier than her sisters, she was also more virtuous than they, for they were proud of their riches. They would only know people of better condition than themselves. Every day, they went to the balls and theaters, and laughed at Beauty, who spent a great part of her time in study. As it was well known that these sisters were very rich, many great merchants wished to marry them, but the 2 eldest always said that they would never marry anyone but a duke, or at least an earl. Beauty, however, thanked those who wished to marry her, saying that she was too young to leave her father, whose companion she hoped to be for some years longer. All at once, the merchant lost his whole fortune, and nothing was left him but a little house in the country, a great way from town. Weeping, he told his children that they must go and live there and work for their living. The 2 eldest daughters answered that they would not leave town, and that they had several lovers who would be glad to marry them, though they had no fortune. But in this they were mistaken, for their lovers slighted and forsook them in their poverty. As they were not beloved on account of their pride, everybody said, "They do not deserve to be pitied. We are glad to see their pride humbled. Let them go and give themselves quality airs in milking the cows and minding their dairy." But, added they, "we are very sorry for Beauty. She was such a good girl. She spoke so softly to poor folk, and was gentle and kind. Nay, several gentlemen would have married her, although they knew she had not a penny. But she told them she could not think of leaving her poor father in his trouble, but was determined to go with him into the country, to comfort him and give what help she could. Poor Beauty, at first, was sadly grieved at the loss of her fortune. But, said she to herself, were I to cry ever so much, it would make things no better. So I must try to make myself happy without a fortune. When they came to their cottage, the merchant and his sons spent their time in tilling the ground. Beauty rose at 4 in the morning and made haste to have the house clean and dinner ready for them all. At first, she found it very difficult, for she had not been used to work hard. But in less than 2 months, she grew stronger and healthier than ever. After she had done her work, she read, played on her harpsichord, or else sang whilst she spun. Her 2 sisters, on the contrary, were wretched. They got up at 10 o'clock, and did nothing but saunter about the whole day, and complained of the loss of their fine clothes and acquaintance. "Do but see our youngest sister," said one to the other. "What a poor, stupid, mean-spirited creature she is, to be contented with such a miserable lot." The good merchant, however, thought quite differently. He knew very well that Beauty was as much fairer than her sisters as she was wiser, and admired her humility, her industry, and above all, her patience. For her sisters not only left her all the work of the house to do, but insulted her every minute. For about a year, they lived together in this loneliness, when the merchant received a letter with an account of how a ship, on board of which he had some goods, was safely arrived. This news had like to have turned the heads of the 2 eldest daughters, who thought that here was a chance of leaving the country where they were so wretched. And when they saw their father ready to set out, they begged of him to buy them new gowns, caps, rings, and all manner of trifles. But Beauty asked for nothing, for she thought to herself that all the money her father was going to receive would scarce be enough to buy everything that her sisters wanted. "What will you have, Beauty?" said her father. "Since you are so good as to think of me," answered she, "pray bring me a rose, for we have none in our garden." The good man went on his journey, but when he reached town, they went to law with him about his goods, and after a great deal of trouble and pains to no purpose, he came back as poor as before. He was within 30 miles of his own house, thinking on the pleasure he should have in seeing his children again, when going through a great forest he lost his way. It was snowing hard, and besides, the wind was so high it blew him twice off his horse. And night coming on, he began to fear of being starved to death with cold and hunger, or else eaten by the wolves whom he heard howling all around him. Suddenly, looking down a long avenue of trees, he saw a bright light some way off, and going a little farther, found that it came from a palace which was lit up from top to bottom. The merchant thanked God for the help he had sent, and made haste to reach the castle, but was greatly surprised not to meet anyone in the courtyards. His horse followed him, and seeing a large stable open, went in, and finding both hay and oats, the poor beast, who was almost famished, fell to eating very heartily. The merchant tied him up to the manger and walked toward the house, where he saw no one. But entering into a large hall, he found a good fire and a table plentifully set out, with but one cover laid. As he was wet quite through with the rain and snow, he drew near the fire to dry himself. "I hope," said he, "the master of the house or his servants will excuse the liberty I take. I suppose it will not be long before some of them appear." He waited a considerable time, till it struck 11, and still nobody came. At last he was so hungry that he could stay no longer, but took a chicken and ate it in 2 mouthfuls, trembling all the while. After this, he drank a few glasses of wine, and growing more courageous, he went out of the hall and crossed through several grand apartments with magnificent furniture, till he came into a chamber which had an exceedingly good bed in it. And as he was very much fatigued, and it was past midnight, he concluded it was best to shut the door and go to bed. It was 10 the next morning before the merchant woke, and as he was going to rise, he was astonished to see a good suit of clothes in the room of his own. "Certainly," said he, "this palace belongs to some kind fairy who has seen and pitied my distresses." He looked through a window, but instead of snow, saw the most delightful arbors interwoven with the most beautiful flowers that ever were beheld. He then returned to the great hall, where he had supped the night before, and found some chocolate ready made on a little table. "Thank you, good Madam Fairy," said he aloud, "for being so kind as to think of my breakfast." The good man drank his chocolate, and then went to look for his horse, but passing through an arbor of roses, he remembered Beauty's request and gathered a branch on which were several. Immediately he heard a great noise, and saw such a frightful beast coming towards him that he was ready to faint away. "Ungrateful man," said the beast to him in a terrible voice, "I have saved your life by receiving you into my castle, and in return you steal my roses, which I love better than anything in the world, but you shall die for it. I give you but a quarter of an hour to prepare yourself and to say your prayers." The merchant fell on his knees and lifted up both his hands. "My lord," said he, "I beseech you to forgive me. Indeed, I had no intention to offend in gathering a rose for one of my daughters, who had asked me to bring her one." "My name is not my lord," replied the monster, "but Beast. I don't like compliments, not I. I like people to speak as they think, and so do not expect to move me by any of your flatteries. However, you say you have got daughters. I will forgive you on condition that one of them comes willingly and suffers for you. Let me have no words, but go about your business, and swear that if your daughters refuse to die in your stead, you will return within 3 months." The merchant had no mind to sacrifice his daughters to the ugly monster, but he thought that at least he might have the pleasure of seeing them once more. So he promised to return, and the beast told him he might set out when he pleased. "But," added he, "you shall not depart empty-handed. Go back to the room where you lay, and you will see a great empty chest. Fill it with whatever you like best, and I will send it to your home." And with that, the beast went away. "Well," said the good man to himself, "if I must die, I shall have the comfort, at least, of leaving something to my poor children." He returned to the bedchamber, and finding a quantity of broad pieces of gold, he filled the great chest the beast had told him of, locked it, and then took his horse out of the stable, leaving the palace with as much grief as he had entered it with joy. The horse, of his own accord, took one of the roads of the forest, and in a few hours the good merchant was at home. His children came around him, but instead of receiving their caresses with pleasure, he stood weeping and looked at them. Then holding the rose branch he carried to Beauty, he said to her, "Take these roses, Beauty. Little do you think how dear they will cost your poor father." And so he told them all the sad adventure he had fallen in with. Immediately the 2 eldest set up a most dolorous outcry, and spoke unkindly to Beauty, who, however, did not cry at all. "See what come of the little wretch's pride," said they. "She would not ask for fine clothes, as we did. No, indeed, Miss wished to be uncommon, and now that she is going to be the death of our poor father, she will not shed a tear." "Why should I?" answered Beauty. "It would be very needless, for my father shall not suffer on my account. Since the monster will accept one of his daughters, I will go and give myself up to him, and happy am I to think that my death will save my father's life and be proof of my love for him." "No, sister," said her 3 brothers, "that shall not be. We will go and find the monster, and either kill him or die ourselves." "Do not imagine any such thing, my sons," said the merchant. "Beast's power is so great that I have no hopes of your getting the better of him. I am touched by Beauty's kindness of heart, but I cannot do as she would have me. I am old and have but little longer to live, so at most I lose a few years, which I regret for your sakes, my dear children." "Indeed, father, you shall not go to the palace without me," said Beauty. "You cannot hinder me from following you." In spite of all they could say, Beauty still insisted on setting out for the palace, and her sisters were not sorry, for her goodness had filled them with jealousy. The merchant, however, was so grieved at the thought of losing his daughter that he had quite forgot the chest full of gold. But at night, as soon as he had shut his chamber door, what was his astonishment to find it by his bedside. He determined, however, not to tell his children that he had grown rich, as his 2 elder daughters would have wanted to return to town, and he was resolved not to leave the country. But he trusted Beauty with the secret, who then told him that 2 gentlemen came in his absence and courted her sisters. She begged her father to consent to their marriage and give them fortunes, for she was so good that she loved them and forgave them heartily for all their ill usage. These wicked creatures rubbed their eyes with an onion to force some tears when they parted with their sister. But her brothers were really concerned. Beauty was the only one who did not shed tears at parting, for she would not increase their grief. The horse took the direct road to the palace, and towards evening they saw it all lit up as at first. The horse went of himself into the stable, and the good man and his daughter came into the great hall, where they found a table magnificently spread, with 2 covers laid. The merchant had no heart to eat, but Beauty, trying to appear cheerful, sat down to table and helped him. Afterwards, she thought to herself, "Beast surely has a mind to fatten me before he eats me, since he provides such a good supper." When they had supped, they heard a great noise, and the merchant, in tears, bid his poor child farewell, for he thought Beast was coming. Beauty was sadly terrified at his horrid form, but she took courage as well as she could, and the monster, having asked her if she came willingly, Yes," said she, trembling. "You are very good, and I am grateful to you. Honest man, go your ways tomorrow morning, but never think of returning here again. Farewell, Beauty." "Farewell, Beast," answered she, sighing, and immediately the monster turned to go away. "Oh, daughter," said the merchant, embracing Beauty, "I am almost frightened to death. Believe me, you had better go back and let me stay here." "No, father," said Beauty firmly. "Do you go and leave me to the care and protection of Providence." They went to bed and thought they should not close their eyes all night, but scarce had they lain down than they fell fast asleep. And Beauty dreamed a fair lady came and said to her, "I am pleased with your brave heart, Beauty. This good action of yours in giving up your own life to save your father's shall not go unrewarded." Beauty woke and told her father her dream, and though it helped to comfort him a little, he could not help crying bitterly when he took leave of his dear child, as he feared he might never see her again. As soon as he was gone, Beauty sat down in the great hall and fell a-crying likewise. But as she was mistress of a great deal of spirit, she recommended herself to God, and resolved not to be uneasy the little time she had to live, for she firmly believed Beast would eat her up that night. She made up her mind then to walk about and see this great castle, which she could not help admiring. It was a delightful, pleasant place, and she was extremely surprised to find a door over which was written, "Beauty's Room." She quickly opened the door and was dazzled by the splendor that she saw within. There, among other things, was a great library, a harpsichord, and many books of music. "Ah," thought Beauty, "had they thought of eating me at once, they would surely not have made such provision for my amusement." So taking heart, she opened the library, and there saw written in gold letters, "Wish or command, you are queen and mistress here." "Alas," said she, sighing, "I want nothing but to see my poor father again, and to know what he is now doing." Scarce had she thought it, when what was her surprise on looking at a great mirror nearby, to see there her own home, where her father was just arriving with a most sad face. Her sisters came out to meet him, and in spite of the grimaces which they made so as to seem in grief, the joy they felt at their sister's loss was plain to see. One moment after, all had vanished, and Beauty could not but think it had been a proof of the Beast's kindness, and that she had nothing to fear from him. Towards evening, she returned to the great hall, where she found dinner ready prepared. The most delightful music played during the whole of dinner. When Beauty had finished, the table was cleared, and the choicest wines and the most delicious fruits were then laid. At the same hour as on the day before, she heard the noise of Beast's coming, and he entered, and advancing towards Beauty, who dared not look up. He said, "Will you permit me to sit with you?" "That is as you please," replied she. "Not so," said Beast, "for your mistress here, and if my company is disagreeable, I will be gone. But tell me, Beauty, do you think me very ugly?" "I do indeed," said she, "to speak the truth, but I think you are very good." "You are right," said the monster, "but that is not all, for I am stupid as well as ugly. I know well that I am nothing but a beast." "No one is really stupid who thinks that he has little wit," answered Beauty. "No fool ever thought that." "Ah, well," said the Beast, "try to make yourself happy here, Beauty." "I should be sorry if you were unhappy." "You are very kind, Beast," said she. "Indeed, when I think of your good heart, you no longer seem to me so ugly." "Dear me, yes," said he. "My heart is good, but for all that I am a monster." "There are many who are really more of monsters than you," answered Beauty, "and I like you better with that face than many who under an appearance of beauty had a cruel heart." "Ah," said Beast, "if I were not so stupid, I would know how to thank you." So Beauty talked to him, gaining courage the while, but she had like to have fainted with fright when, taking hold of her hand, Beast said in a gentle voice, "Beauty, will you marry me?" She hastily withdrew her hand, but made no reply, at which the Beast sighed deeply and withdrew. On his next visit, he appeared sorrowful and dejected, but said nothing. Some weeks after, he repeated the question, when Beauty replied, "No, Beast, I cannot marry you, but I will do all in my power to make you happy." "This you cannot do," replied he, "for unless you marry me, I shall die." "Oh, say not so," said Beauty, "for it is impossible that I can ever marry you." The Beast then went away, more unhappy than ever. Then Beauty was seized with compassion. "Alas," sighed she, "'tis a thousand pities anything so good-natured should be so ugly." Amidst all this, Beauty did not forget her father. One day, she felt a strong desire to know how he was and what he was doing. At that instant, she cast her eyes on a mirror and saw her father had pined himself ill and lay in his bed, whilst her sisters were trying on some fine dresses in another room. At this sad sight, poor Beauty wept bitterly. When Beast came as usual, he saw her grief and asked the cause. She told him what she had seen and how much she wished to go and nurse her father. He asked her if she would promise to return at the end of the week if she went. Beauty gave him her promise. "Well then," said Beast, "you will find yourself there tomorrow, but do not forget to return. You will only have to place your ring on a table when you go to bed, if you wish to come back. Farewell, Beauty." Beast sighed as he spoke, and Beauty went to bed very sad, because she must give him pain. When she woke in the morning, she found herself in her father's cottage, and on ringing a little bell she found by her bed, the servant entered and cried out on seeing her. The good man hastened to her on hearing the noise, and had almost died of joy when he saw his dear daughter, and for more than a quarter of an hour they forgot all else. Then Beauty remembered that she had no gown to put on, but the servant told her that she had just found in the next room a great chest full of golden gowns, sewn with diamonds. Beauty thanked the good Beast in her heart, and choosing the simplest dress, she told the maid to lock away the others, as she would give them to her sisters. But hardly had she said so when the chest disappeared. Her father told her that Beast wished her to keep them for herself, when immediately the dresses and the chest came back to the same place. Then Beauty put on her gown, and when she had done so, her sisters, who had been sent for, came with their husbands. They were both very unhappy. The eldest had married a young gentleman, as handsome as the day, but he was so much in love with his own face that he thought of nothing else from morning till night, and never noticed the beauty of his wife. The second had married a man who had very pretty wit, but he only used it to annoy everyone, beginning with his wife. The two sisters were very much annoyed at Beauty's return, for they had hoped that the Beast would have destroyed her. They were greatly annoyed to see her dressed like a queen and as lovely as a flower. In vain did Beauty caress them. Nothing could check their jealousy, which only increased when Beauty told them of her happiness. So these two went down to the garden where they could talk as they pleased. The eldest said to the other, "Why should this minx be better off than we are? Let us try to keep her here beyond the time. The monster will then be so enraged with her for breaking her promise that he will destroy her at once when she returns." "That is well thought of," replied the sister. "We will keep her." In order to succeed, they treated Beauty with the greatest affection, so that she almost wept for joy. When the week had passed, the two sisters tore their hair and made as though they would die of grief if Beauty were to go, so that she easily promised to remain another week. Nevertheless, Beauty fretted at the grief she must be causing to her poor Beast, whom she loved with all her heart and longed to see again. The 10th night that she spent at her father's house, she dreamed that she was in the palace garden, and that she saw the Beast lying on the grass and like to die, and that he reproached her for her ingratitude. Beauty awoke weeping. "Ah," said she, "am I not ungrateful to grieve a Beast who is so kind to me? What fault is it of his that he is ugly and stupid? He is good, and that is better than all the rest. Why did I not marry him? I should, at any rate, be happier than my sisters, who are no better off for the beauty and wit of their husbands. No, I will not make Beast unhappy. All my life long, I should have to reproach myself for such ingratitude." So Beauty got up, and placing the ring on the table, fell again into a sound sleep, from which she woke to find herself in the palace. Everything was just as she had left it, but the sweet sounds of music which used to greet her were now hushed, and there was an air of apparent gloom hanging over everything. She herself felt very sad, but she knew not why. At the usual time, she expected a visit from Beast, but no Beast appeared. Beauty, wondering what all this could mean, now reproached herself for her ingratitude in not having returned as she promised. She feared the poor Beast had died of grief, and she resolved to seek him in every part of the palace, and ran through every apartment, but no Beast could be seen. Then, remembering her dream, with a sorrowful heart, she hastened into the garden, going towards the little canal beside which she had seen him in her sleep. At that moment, she arrived at a plot of grass where the poor Beast lay as if dead. Beauty ran towards him and knelt by his side, and finding that he still lived, she flung some water from the canal over his head. He opened his eyes and said, "Beauty, you forgot your promise, and therefore I must die." "No, dear Beast," exclaimed Beauty, weeping. "No, you shall not die. You will live to be my husband. I thought, indeed, that I had only friendship for you, but now I know that I love you with my whole heart." No sooner had these words passed her lips than the Beast disappeared, and she saw at her feet a handsome prince, who thanked her for having broken his enchantment. At the same moment, the whole castle was lit up, the sweetest music was heard, and bells rang in all their cheering melody. Beauty, however, could think of nothing but her dear Beast, and asked the prince where she could find him. "You see him at your feet," answered he, and then he told her that a wicked magician had condemned him to wear the form of a beast until a beautiful maiden should consent to marry him. "But," added he, "you are the only one good enough to be touched by my kind heart and unhappy state, so that this palace and all that belongs to me is but a poor return for your sweet goodness." So saying, he led Beauty to the great hall of the palace, which was now thronged, for at the same instant that the beast was changed, the whole palace became full of courtiers, all of whom had been rendered invisible when the prince was enchanted. But what was Beauty's joy to find that her father and sisters, transported there by the kind fairy who had appeared to her in her sleep. "Beauty," said she, "here is the reward of your wise choice. You have chosen goodness, and you shall have beauty and wisdom as well." Then turning to the frowning sisters, she punished them by turning them into 2 statues to stand by the door of their sister's palace, until their hard hearts should change and become soft. So the prince married Beauty, and they lived happily together for many, many years. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this reading, do give it a like and share it with your friends and family. Thanks in advance for all your support, and see you again tomorrow.